Okay, we're ready to get started today. Welcome everybody to Downstream 2020. Our first session this morning will be strategic direction and roadmap of our products, and that will be presented by Rick Almeida. And Rick is one of the founders here at Downstream. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick.
Thank you, Ray. Hello, everybody. Welcome to our first user summit. We decided to do this basically given the current environment with COVID, travel restrictions, social distancing. It makes it really challenging for us to meet with our customers and to share where we're going. So we elected to put on this virtual event here to allow us to share our development plans with you, update you on our strategic directions, and more importantly, we had a very major release just about a year and a half ago to give you more technical insight on some of the functionality that's contained in the current release of products that you may or may not be using at this time. To go a little bit over the trajectory and the tracks for the summit this week, we'll be doing 3 days worth of seminars. They've been deliberately broken down into half-hour, 1-hour increments so that we can check in, or you can check in and check out whenever you like. It's a lot less formal than flying to a specific live event to find out about your products. The downside is we do miss that user-to-user peer networking. However, in light of everything, we think this is a much safer way to share information about our products and to bring you updated on what's going on. Today, there are 3 small webinars that are planned, the first one being this welcome address, as well as the strategic overview of where Downstream is going and our product roadmap for the next several years. Mark Gallant will continue on with a sneak peek at the current product that's in development to be released imminently by the end of the year. And we'll close today's sessions out with Ray Fugit, our application engineer, who will provide some insight into CAM350's verification and analysis. We'll pick up tomorrow with Joe Clark, another founder of Downstream, who will demonstrate some of the uses of new 3D technology we've released a year ago inside the Blueprint PCB package. Mike Harris will then continue on. I know a lot of people are using Netlist Compare and CAM350 to do quick verifications of designs, and Mike has some keen insights and tips to make that process go easier. Joe will then close out the session tomorrow by illustrating how variants and process steps can be used in the documentation process intelligently so that we get better manufacturing instructions for downstream processes. The last day of the webinar, as you guys may have already seen, we've had a huge release that dramatically changed the user interface inside of CAM350 and Blueprint. And Mark Gallant, our product marketing manager, will give you tips and techniques on how to make the best use of that new user interface to streamline your design flow. Ray Fugit will then continue on with a Blueprint webinar on panel design and the issues that cover both assembly panels and production panels and the differences between the two. And I'll return at the end of the summit here to talk about our 3D technology, why we did it, and why we think it's beneficial in bringing your products to market faster. So let's just jump into Downstreaming 2020 and our strategic direction and roadmap. So just a quick disclaimer, anytime we get into forecasting what we're going to release 12, 14, 24 months out, we like to preface it with that these are planning roadmaps. We have dates, we have timelines, and we have content scheduled, but the further out we go, the more likely those dates and content may change based to market or economic conditions. However, at this point in time, this is the direction that we'll be taking. So I just want to quickly recap the CAM350 version 14 and Blueprint version 6 product release. That was an enormous development effort for Downstream. In fact, short of rewriting the product, we basically touched almost every single part of both products to bring that to market. The biggest change was to realign CAM350's user interface with more current user interface models that are in the market, and also to align it with Blueprint's user interface. One of the areas that you'll see as well we'll be talking about over the next 3 days is the implementation of 3D graphics and documents, not necessarily for design, but for PCB post-processing. We also implemented a common database, and this was integral for us to, one, be able to integrate our products. So if you start a post-processing session in CAM 350, you only need to enter data once in that product, and it's available for Blueprint if you choose to use that for documentation. Or if you choose to start in documentation first, that data is already set up for you to do post-processing with. We've also done a lot of work with stack-up visualization. In fact, you'll hear us use the word visualization quite a bit through this week. We did a lot of work on trying to make the product much more graphically orientated and less based on tables and text files and so forth. Another thing we did in that development release was to set up the product so that we could share modules and interchange them as we need to. And when you see some of the roadmaps, you'll get an idea as to what that actually means for you as our customers. After we did the first release, because it was such a major release, we had anticipated that we would need to do some bug fix releases over the course of 2019 into 2020. We did several builds of the product under the version 14.1 and 6.1 releases that basically addressed any type of missing functionality that we weren't able to get into the product in the September timeframe for 2018. But also to fix a number of critical defects. Whenever you start to touch things like graphics, database, and UI, you have to really focus on making sure that you maintain the stabilization of the product going forward, and that's what these releases were about. The benefits we see for our customers with version 14 and version 6 respectively is there should be more productivity with the newer modern GUI. We've streamlined that user interface. We've cut down a lot of mouse clicks and menu selections. We've flattened out a lot of the menu structure so everything is pretty much available to you at the same time. As we mentioned before, we've implemented new 3D capability, and I'll get into that at the end of this week as to why we did that. But we felt that it was very important to add 3D to continue to maintain continuity from the PCB design process where 3D is being deployed a lot, as well as being able to predict what the manufacturing result will look like inside of CAM. The tighter integration between downstream products means that you don't have to spend a lot of time re-entering information to use one product and then go to the next. And again, this release sets us up for follow-on releases where we can share more technology and be more efficient in how we develop the technology and bring it to market. So our strategy is going forward is basically to move away from the long 3-year development cycle and focus on shorter 6 to 12 months development cycle where we can bring product functionality to you a lot quicker. And we break those out into strategic items, which are to support new technologies for longer term growth for both you and us. Tactical functions, these are the features and enhancements that you need to perform your job faster, and future development. We all work on PCs today, but we also have mobile devices in the way of cellular phones and Surface laptops or iPads and so forth, and we need to make sure that our products are set up for future platforms as we go down the road. The release we currently have in process is CAM 350 version 14.5 and Blueprint version 6.5. And you may have noticed over the last several years we keep these two products in sync with each other when we release them. And the reason for that is, especially as we go forward, that they're becoming more and more tied together. This particular release, you could consider it as a strategic release of flex, rigid flex, and embedded components support for both Blueprint and CAM 350. The driving reason for this is twofold. One is flex and embedded components are becoming more and more used in electronic products today, which means that they're being done more in the design systems today. And our philosophy is that whatever is going on in the design systems, we have to maintain that continuity when you go into post-processing. Without going into this too much, because Mark Gallant will be giving you a very in-depth presentation following this one on version 14.5 and 6.5. But the view here is that Flex and Embedded will be supported for visualization and in the database, as well as building Flex-specific documentation. Part of that also requires a lot of work into what we call our stack-up visualizer. To support Flex, it becomes very crucial to be able to take the stack-up and be able to identify what zones are related to what portions of the Flex design. So the stack-up visualizer itself has gotten quite a workover in this current release to support zones for Flex circuits so that you can define what your rigid section is, what your Flex section is. If you have multiple rigid sections, you can tie them together. We also did a lot of work in managing cores and different construction materials inside the stack-up visualizer. So previously with CAM350, before version 14, a lot of the stack-up was really just to order CAM data files to kind of create a stack-up. There wasn't a lot paid attention to as far as dielectric materials or construction materials. We felt that this was important for Flex as well as for 3D and really understanding the construction process for the PCB or the Flex PCB. We've also extended Flex into the blueprint documentation tool, specifically in cases of the stack-up cross-section as well as drill charts by zones. And again, Mark will give you a little more insight as to what we're doing there to further support Flex. But when you tie the Flex capability in with 3D, it really starts to allow you to create a very vivid picture and illustration of how that final Flex product should look like from manufacturing for the market. So Flex is a pretty large release for us when we think of all the things that we want to do. And when I say Flex, I do use it interchangeably with embedded components, so bear with me here. So what we've decided to do, because we do want to keep these as small tactical releases that you can rely on every 6 to 12 months, we're breaking Flex up into different phases. The first phase will be coming out at the end of next month, which basically aligns the downstream products with the Mentor products and the Cadence products, the Zuken products, the Pulsonics products, where if you're doing Flex design and Altium as well, if you're doing Flex design in any of those products, you can continue on with CAM350 and Blueprint for the post-processing. Phase 2 will start to develop more DFM analysis based on Flex and embedded rules for manufacturing. And Phase 3, we will continue to add support for Flex and embedded design capability for manufacturing purposes. We won't be building a Flex design tool, but just making sure that all the capability is there to manufacture it correctly. Following this release, which we expect to begin early this year, we'll start the specifications and development of what we're currently calling CAM350 version 15, Blueprint version 7. And as you can see on the left side here, one of the key elements of this release is our first implementation of Flex DFM. We're also implementing new VB scripting for CAM350. This is an item that fell out of the initial development cycle for version 14, and it's meant to replace the macro language. And I shouldn't say replace it. We won't be pulling the macro language support out. VB scripting will live alongside of it, but what it does is it provides more of an industry standard way to create scripts to drive your products or to drive the product on your behalf and integrate it inside of your company. Netlist Compare will also get some attention as far as enhancing the error navigation and making Netlist Compare just a lot faster and more proficient for users to use. We'll also be adding more attributes supports for when we're reading in Gerber to detect different vias and different pads from one another. We'll be doing quite a bit of work in this next release on our 2D graphics as well. We're really looking at trying to make sure that our graphics are lightning fast. And again, what we do here will be, with our graphics, will be used in other products that we have. We're also looking at a new stencil support package to add features and configurations specifically for stencil design within CAM350. And at last, Lee will be doing more support for the IPC 2581 Rev C to improve our integration with the PCB CAD systems. One thing to note here is that this release will focus primarily on the CAM350 product, and there'll be a little less development done in the Blueprint product. The follow-on release will add quite a bit more capability to Blueprint, and CAM350 will be the secondary release. But this just allows us to get critical mass on one product without diluting it between the two. So in Blueprint, what you'll see is any graphics work we did in CAM 350 will be applied to the Blueprint product. We are also looking, because we have a very strong assembly panel tool for documentation inside of Blueprint, of the ability to add multiple PCBs and configure those PCBs as tightly as possible so that you can create a group and use that group for assembly array. Again, the support for 2581 will also be implemented in Blueprint, and we will be looking for customer requests and obviously defect enhancements as we go through that development process. So the release that we'll begin at the beginning of the year will focus primarily on CAM 350, provide some strategic things in the way of flex support and DFM, but also provide some tactical functionality for both products as we go through that development cycle. We expect at some point in 2022 we'll begin what we'll say is Blueprint version 8 and CAM 350 version 16. This release will be primarily focused on the Blueprint product and more so on ECO and ECO management and how data gets managed. When we talked previously about interchanging modules with our products, one of the areas you'll see that come to fruition is the implementation of our design comparator tool out of CAM 350 and integrating that also into Blueprint, as well as taking that technology and extending it not just out to the design, but also to be able to scan the two different document revisions and report on changes between those revisions. CAM 350, as I mentioned earlier, would take a secondary role here, and what we plan for that is the second introduction of DFM analysis for Flex, as well as further development for the IPC 2581 Rev C spec. There is also customer enhancements which will be considered, as well as defect fixes for that release. Around this same time frame, and we've already started this as far as prototyping different technologies, we will begin development of what we're calling a downstream universal viewer and application. Now, this viewer is intended for web use as well as portable device use. So the first implementation, again, we'll be looking at this in phases, is to just focus on the viewing technologies for all our products in the cloud and both in the office. The second phase would be to research and look at which batch processes make the best sense to bring into that platform. And the third development milestone for that will be to add the designing capability to those platforms. So we'll be doing some of this stuff in parallel as we continue on our development cycle over the next 24 months. So the timeline. What I did here was to break out for you where the major releases will fall in, and also for those that are interested in Flex, where the Flex releases will tie in, what releases they work into. So this kind of gives you a slightly clearer picture of how we're breaking functionality out and delivering it in shorter time frames. So like I mentioned earlier, by the end of November, we expect to have released version 14.5 and 6.5 of Blueprint for our Flex and embedded capability. That's pretty set in stone at the moment. Starting very early in 2021, we'll begin specifications while we continue to do defect fixes on the version 14.5, 6.5, and start development and bring that product release to fruition sometime mid to late 2021, depending on what we elect to keep into the product or what we may add as we go through that product development cycle. And the version 16, version 8 for Blueprint will come out around the same time, 12 months later in 2022. At that point, we expect that we'll be into the future web development. And when I say web, I mean web and mobile devices. And along the bottom, you can see where we plan to implement different modules for Flex within those releases. So, quick presentation here. CAM 350, just to conclude here, we think that the release we did in 2018 well positions Downstream for future advancements here. The strategy of bringing you more technology or more capability in a shorter time frame actually has benefits for you and benefits for us as well, because we can focus. It's much easier for us to manage. We can focus on them, and once they're delivered to the marketplace, we can go on to the next batch of things. And the aggregate is that we can bring more technology and functionality to market faster this way than through long 3-year development cycles. Excuse me. We'll also continue to focus on keeping our alignment with the PCB CAD systems. This will place more emphasis on complex technologies, further developing flex and embedded capability within our products, as well as continuing to develop 3D technology. 2D is, still widely used and still should be used. There's a time and a place for it. But when you look at where the breakthroughs are being made, everybody is now moving to the 3D capability. But we do think that these releases are just, combinations of both strategic and tactical functions that we think can help you both in the short term and the long term. So that's overall where we went. If we want, Ray, we can start. If there are any questions, we can answer some questions.
All right. Thank you, Rick. I do have a couple questions. Number one, is there any plan to improve the working speed of CAM 350 version 14 and later versus earlier versions such as version 12?
Yes, there is. So we always look at performance. And one of the things that we did find when we've dealt with version 14 is, as I mentioned earlier, we changed the database, we changed the graphics, and we changed the UI. Now, we think that was done for all the right reasons. What happens when you do that, though, is you have a potential for a performance hit. And that's one of the reasons why we're looking at accelerating the 2D graphics. We will also be looking, it won't be as apparent to you as a user until you see the products, but we're constantly looking at increasing the performance of the product and the speed. So that is an area that we're sensitive to. We know that it may have taken a bit of a hit with that release, so we want to make sure that the product becomes as lightning fast as you remember it to be.
A related question, is there any plans for support of discrete graphics cards?
Currently, at the moment, no, there is no plans for support of discrete graphic cards. It is something we can look at. I think what the development team is looking at is how to take care of the graphics how to support the graphics capabilities that are predominant on most available laptops today and how to leverage that technology for CAM 350 and Blueprint. It's not out of the question, and as we see more and more requests for it, we'd certainly consider it.
And this is a personal question. A 3D mouse, have we looked into that at all?
We did, and we still should. We had that initially planned for the 14 release. We did pull it out just because we ran out of time to do it. So we are looking at how well 3D is being adopted in the marketplace, and that will drive our basically our decision as when we support 3D mouse.
One further question here, and I've asked for more information here, but are there any plans to allow or integrate use of defined layers, user-defined layers, I believe is the question, in CAM 350? And I'm at a loss myself as to what you would use that for, so I have asked the person that asked the question to go a little bit further with that. But maybe you have an idea there?
Well, I think we'd need to understand more about what those user-defined layers are intended to do. We don't use the product. We manufacture and we develop the product. So if there is a use for things that we can't foresee that customers are telling us, they're certainly viable for us to develop. So I'd want to know more about what we'd want to do with user-defined layers as opposed to what's not in CAM 350 today. We did do a lot of work in version 14 to try to categorize different layers, from CAM layers to intelligent design layers to graphic layers and so forth. So we just need to be a little bit clearer for us to understand what it is that we're not currently doing that you'd need us to do, and we would consider it.
Okay, yeah, and there is a follow-up answer here. The user says he wants to read his own generated Gerber information to analyze something like test points, coverage for test points, that sort of thing.
And if I was under the impression we're doing that today, you can read data in and assign it to various different layers. Would there be something different, Ray, do you think, that we'd want to do here?
Well, I think the question really, if I'm reading this correctly, and the user can correct me, is it has to do with test points, and we're talking about not bare board test points. We're talking about loaded board test points. So, and you can comment on that. We've never really gone down that road of doing, in-circuit test or any of those.
Yeah, sure. So that is, and again, it's not in this roadmap. That has always been part of one of the things we had foreseen users doing with Blueprint to create a test document. Let me make sure I'm explaining this correctly. And one of the reasons that we did a lot of this common database and sharing of information is something like test points or even rework actually has two phases. There's the documentation phase, which is what Blueprint is all about, but there's also the design phase. How do you ensure that you have adequate test coverage? How do you route, jumper wires or make cuts? And there's a design phase there as well. So our philosophy looking at our two products is that anything that requires a design element to it would be done in the CAM 350 environment. Anything that required documenting that design element would be leveraged in the Blueprint product. So the integration that we've spoke about, the common database, the common look and feel, all points to supporting that type of application. And it could be for in-circuit tests, or it could be for rework. It could be for a future panel design. As you know, we have a panel design for production in CAM 350, and we have assembly panel design inside of Blueprint. There's an opportunity down the road for us to combine those two into a new universal panel editor that does the design in one application and extends that design information to Blueprint for the documentation process.
Okay.
So if there are any short-term tactical things we can do to help facilitate that, what I would suggest is the user to contact you directly, Ray, and collect some of the requirements, because we will be adding, user enhancements throughout our development cycle over the next 24 months.